So what's the story and mission behind the AAP and Bunker Art Writing Residency?
The story starts over margaritas, was it? I believe
I think so.
And Bunker had 2 weeks open, and
Yeah.
you approached me with this idea, and I was like, we're looking to partner. You know, one of the benefits of not having a permanent space aside from our office at AAP is that we can kind of be flexible and what we're doing. And Jesse came up with this idea, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, and that was even before the first margarita was finished. I was like, yes, let's do that. Let's run with it. Because it's something, you know, I think the larger art world is dealing with, as well as locally, nationally, wherever, is arts writing and the lack of it, or the lack of critiquing, or, you know, it's part of the press in an age when people are really trying to figure out exactly where the newspaper fits in. And so in Pittsburgh, you know, with the Post-Gazette, I think they don't even deliver on Monday or something anymore. There's some sort of component of delivery. They have a few writers, but we really were sitting there talking about what would it be like to really dedicate a space and time to arts writing, and what would that look like? And we had like 2 months to do it.
Yeah, we pulled it together quick. But yeah, so I guess all of that is to say that the conversation and writing about art is really important to us. And I think it's one of those things that kind of, it's what lives on in people, like after they see the work and after they make it. And that's really important. And just like a response to media gaps and sort of wanting that deep understanding from writers. And so that's sort of the space that we were interested in carving out. So yeah, and just so you know, like after we get to talking a little while, like you can totally pose questions and sort of talk with us. This is definitely going to be open to everybody, and so if you have a thought that's different than our topics, go for it. Yeah. Well, so the story of, oh my mom's calling me a lot. This is not good timing. Oh boy.
So we had been talking, and Tara Faye, I don't think Tara's here, she met with us over coffee as well, and Tina's name came out. A lot of times I feel like we're waiting for approval from the artistic centers. Like we're looking to LA, we're looking to New York, we're looking to London constantly, but they're asking and posing different questions and have different problems and issues. And so we started talking to Tara, who's a native of Buffalo, and your name came up. And we're like, let's do it. This makes, for us, a city like Pittsburgh, there are more similar stories being told between a Buffalo and a Pittsburgh, or a Pittsburgh and a Cincinnati, or a Detroit, than a Pittsburgh and a New York or Miami. It's just the reality of that.
Yeah, so it's cool to have someone coming from another Rust Belt city that has experience.
Yeah, so let's pivot to you, Tina.
Oh boy.
Tell us about
pivot.
Well,
if you want to just share like some glimpses of your journey as an artist and an arts professional, like sort of just a couple key moments that would kind of anchor your story for everybody who doesn't know you.
Yeah, and my story definitely has like a lot of different layers to it. Can I like ask the audience real quick, because I'm curious, because like they said, like this is a conversation. Just real quick, hands in the air. Are you a maker? Like those that make objects or things or events or people? I don't know. Awesome. Are there people that consider themselves writers in the audience? Do you write about other things and people and stuff? So just a couple. Cool. Are there those that work in the arts as an administration, grant writing, run spaces? A few more. Did anyone not raise their hand in any of that? And if so, where are you in the picture?
I just missed the first question.
Oh, are you a maker? Are you a maker? Sorry.
Linda, you're a maker.
Okay. All right, cool. Oh, no, great. So we met over, we had brunch this morning, and we were talking about these questions, and they were like, oh, where should we start? And I was like, oh. And I, for myself, like I've always been a maker, but I've always been a maker from the standpoint of it's really important for me to share. When I was in like 7th grade, I would come back to elementary school and like teach like art and like library classes. And so I've kind of always have thought about the other, not just like in addition to me. And so my practice has taken on a really sort of interesting web. Like I like to look at it as I have a lot of like tools in my toolbox that I get to activate when the time is right and necessary. Like for instance, like I had to move back to New York to help family, and I ended up settling in Buffalo, New York, which most people would be like, why would you move there? Like when I moved there, they were like, why are you here? Because I had come from California, where I'd been living in the Bay Area for 10 years. But Buffalo was this at this place in its history where it was starting to be revitalized, and there was money from the outside that was starting to develop new businesses and projects and land and things that I felt as a maker and a creator of things and spaces and what have you, that it was sort of like a vital time for me to kind of move there and to start something. Like I felt like there was like room and space. And I had done some research, and I was like, oh, Buffalo is like the 2nd largest city in the state of New York. So that's like opposite of New York City, which, you know, is like one of the largest cities in the world. Like I was thinking in terms of funding that means that they would get like the 2nd biggest pie in the state. Little did I know that there's like not much of the pie outside of New York City, especially in Buffalo. And that was like a whole nother conversation. But I feel like I'm like all over the place, but so I guess I'll just like talk recent because that's
Sure, yeah.
So when I chose to move to Buffalo, I visited a couple times, and within a month I came up with this business plan for this project that I ran called Project Grant, which was a residency program where I invited artists from around the world to collaborate with me on site-specific community engagement projects in disenfranchised neighborhoods in Buffalo. Whew, that's like a mouthful. How did I get to that? Like I got to like understanding the city by just talking to people and visiting neighborhoods and looking outside of the arts community. And so I worked with community centers that were in the neighborhoods and would partner with them, and I would offer my services to those organizations for free. So I was raising the money to bring the artists to Buffalo to do these projects. And with the house that I found on Craigslist, I was able to host the artist and give them a free place to stay for while they were in town with me. And they were usually in town for about a couple weeks. And then if it made sense for the project, we would sometimes do workshops that were free for the public.
How did you find the artists that you were working with?
No, that's a great question, because I did sort of an open call the first year, but it ended up like the people I worked with were people either that I knew or they were recommended to me by other people. So for me, it's like really all about community and your network. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a friendly person, even though I'm a little shy up here, but I love meeting people, and so they were mainly just artists that I had started working with, like at another point in my career that I just kind of carry along with me. Like there are some artists that I've worked on with like 3 or 4 projects. And I always like tell people that for me, like when I work with another artist, like I want to be able to sit down and like hang out with them, like have like a cup of coffee or at one point, you know, a beer, you know, just like to get into another, like a different kind of like social setting where you're able to tolerate. Because for me, like working the projects I do, they feel very intimate, and so you got to be able to tolerate and communicate with that person in order to get the project completed, so that's really important. So, and we don't necessarily have to be best friends, but you just develop a relationship, a rapport with that person and such. So,
And Project Grant ran for how many years?
it ran for 2.
Okay.
So, moving to Buffalo, where I only knew like my cousin really, who was another artist active in the community and was the artistic director of SIBA Gallery at the time. So where am I going? I'm sorry, what was the...
Asked about how long Project Grant was.
Oh yeah, 2 years. So moving to Buffalo, I didn't think it would be hard, like, not necessarily, it's always challenging to like find the funding and to, it takes time, to develop those relationships and such. And like I knew that would take time, but I didn't think it would be hard to like get a bartending job or like a waitressing job, because I've been doing that since I was 14. Like I've always relied, like some people are graphic designers or now, coders. I'm like, I'll just go work in a restaurant. But in Buffalo, like it was such a small community and very like tight knit. It was really like, it was even more about who you knew, but there it's like who you're related to, you know what I mean? Like, so it was really hard. And then like the one bartending job that I did have, it's really funny. So bars in Buffalo stay open till 4. And at the time I was working at Squeaky Wheel, and that was just challenging. Like I wouldn't be able to like work until like the later afternoon, because I would get home at like 6 a.m. And then have to, go to an office job later in the day. So, but I didn't think it would be hard. And that job didn't last very long because I got fired because I wore a hoodie to work. It was not the good, it was not the right fit. Let's put it that way. I didn't show enough skin. So, it was really hard. And being an outsider, there were like these things that I didn't think, coming from living in different cities or across the country, that it would be hard to come in and try and find something else to help support the work that I was doing. Because for me, it's like, living and working in the same space has kind of always been my MO. Because it's like, the overheads are shared. So it's, your budgets are smaller and you can focus more on the programming, right? And which is the core of what you're doing. And so, but it was really hard in Buffalo to sustain like another job and things. Like even like with Squeaky Wheel, like that, my position when I was there was a program coordinator. And so I was curating and running events, and that was actually like half-time, like kind of full-time, but paid half-time. But that job actually like went full-time. And I sat down with the ED, and I was running Project Grant, and we were both like looking at each other being like, you can't do this. Like you can't be like a full-time, curator at Squeaky Wheel and run your project. So that's when I had to, I left Squeaky Wheel and to focus on Project Grant. So, but
do you have any thoughts about like the comparison between Buffalo and Pittsburgh, even though
you've been here for a week?
For a week so far.
It's been a very busy week.
Is there anything interesting to compare?
There's a lot of things actually. So this is like officially like my 3rd time ever in Pittsburgh. This is my longest time. Thank you. I was here a few years ago for open engagement and met Steve there, and then I was back in January of 2018 doing studio visits through Radiant Hall. Aureen and Ryan brought me here, whom I don't see in the audience, but thank you, Radiant Hall. So I was here like, but just for like a 3-day weekend or something. So this is like my real like full like push into to Pittsburgh. And just kind of general, I'll be a little transparent, is that right? One of the reasons why I couldn't make it in Buffalo was because the arts funding that did exist, like it was completely like 3/4 saturated at the top. And so it left like, when there's pennies, we're talking pennies in Buffalo, if the pennies are all getting sucked up, like what does that leave you on the low, right? And so in Buffalo, like there was really no money for emerging projects and artist run projects. It was like the institute, like the artist run organizations that are still in existence from like 30 to 40 years ago are somewhere still like in the middle. They're not going up, they're not going down, they're just trying to maintain, but they're also taking up money. And so when so there's that, but there was nothing down at the bottom. And so that was really tough. And so I always trying to think outside of the box was like, okay, well, how about and also in Buffalo, there's not many opportunities for fiscally sponsored projects, which I think is an element. Like it's like to the big problem there. But so are people familiar with fiscally sponsored projects? So it's like it allows like an artist to kind of run like a small mini organization without being a full 501c3, which is like, the process to become one has gotten less expensive over the years, which is great, but it's still expensive to run one. Like the amount of money you spend for your accountant and your lawyer, like it gets costly.
Yes.
And so so I didn't want to go that route. So fiscally sponsored projects can operate and still get donations, which is great. But your fiscal sponsor handles like most of your accounting. So, and the legal stuff. So, so you get like the best of both worlds without having to like manage. So then you're spending less time on the administration and more time on the artistic side of things. So that's what I was for both things I did in Buffalo. And so with that, since there wasn't a lot of grant funding, I went to fiscal sponsorship, corporate sponsorship. And so making connections with business owners and getting in-kind stuff or getting money. And so I went the avenue of like, how do I meet business professionals in Buffalo, and ended up doing like this Leadership Buffalo program where, there was like a price tag to it, but I raised more money by being a member than it did that it cost me to do it. So, it was totally worth it for me. It was a way for me to operate like my last year at the CAS project. So, so yeah, that, and then,
in comparison to Pittsburgh, would you say Pittsburgh has, from your knowledge, more opportunities than for individual funding for artists, or similar in that sense, or?
So I think that Pittsburgh, from what I've been told, actually has like the second highest endowment for the arts in the country. So there is more money here, but it seems that the larger institutions are sucking up a lot of the resources so they don't trickle down and help emerging projects. But there are more opportunities for artists for grants here than there is in Buffalo, for sure. And, like anywhere, it's going to be competitive and there's never enough money, but like, a good sort of analogy of things, it's like, okay, look at this table, right? This is a nice wood solid table. Like, how many legs does it have? It has 4. So anything that you're doing needs, it needs multiple sources in order to fund it. So the table can sit nice and straight and, bear weight, and your weight is your staff and your programming, and so, so there is more, but, there's issues, and then there's like who's in those decision making places, right? And so is it the old guard, which is kind of like what I'm hearing is a mix here, and there's a conservatism, which, there was in Buffalo, and that was really hard. And that was definitely one of the reasons why I had to leave. Like me as an artist trying to like survive there, like I felt like I had to adapt to a different way of being, which didn't feel very comfortable. And so, but in Pittsburgh, it seems like there's a stronger community here that's open to new ideas, and you guys are all like really supportive of one another, and like that's amazing, and don't take that for granted because that's not everywhere, like there weren't many people, like I understand like, maybe there's not as much diversity or like density in the diversity because it's pretty diverse here, but so like I understand like you're not there, there may not be many of you working in this field, but at least there's more than one of you, right? Like in Buffalo, it was like, hi, like, you know, and people were like, who did you talk to? And it's like, I talked to my friends back in California, like, you know, they were like my support line, you know, or friends that I've made along the way that live in different parts of the country or world, you know. So it was hard struggling in an area. So with fewer resources, we'll just put it that way. So
Sure. Yeah, one thing that has come out of our conversations is the role that writing plays in kind of seeking resources, whether that's like an individual artist, a curator, or a whole organization. It's just such an integral part of kind of opening the doors and making a case for what you do. So I think that's part of the conversations that you've been having with artists, and you know we've been talking about too, alongside a more kind of dialogue-based appreciation to make interpretations of work and kind of extend the life of a piece in a more kind of interpretive way. Maybe not necessarily journalistic, but it is, I think, rubbing shoulders with that to some degree.
Oh, definitely. We were talking about this over brunch, that idea of the role communication plays in selling your artwork, right? Like being able to talk about your work, being able to write about your work, how important that is for a lot of people. And then, Tina, you had an interesting quote from when your visit with Jeff. What did he say? Or something like, I don't care if...
Oh, just about people, like,
yeah,
you know,
like that idea of like
they just have to love it, you know. They don't necessarily have to understand it. To buy the work.
Yeah. Where I'm like, no, like, let's have conversations about it. But there's that other side, right? Like there's that, you know, a lot of people are artists or makers because they express themselves in a very specific way, and then, you know, by the process of grant writing or writing press releases or maintaining a social media presence, you're being asked to express yourself in a completely other way. And so I'm wondering, Tina, if you could speak a little bit about writing within your artistic practice versus, and if you can separate the two, writing as an arts administrator, similarities or differences between the two.
Yeah. You know, I think that we all we all have our own personas, you know, and I think that people need to be comfortable and told that it's okay to be themselves, you know, and let that come out in the way that they're expressing themselves, you know, like, and that's through writing, right? Like, you know, when I'm, you know, doing like social media stuff about the projects, it's like I have like a particular voice, you know, and I have like a different like Instagram account and a different Facebook account like for that project. And so there is that image, and then I have me and then my Instagram account, and that's different, and I'm able to say things and share things differently. And so I think that's one way that artists and people can kind of separate themselves from like their specific work practices and such. And so there's that. But you know, also like so when I was an arts writer in Buffalo, it sounds funny for me to say that because, you know, Buffalo is a small place, you know, and it's like many people, I don't know, but so I technically wrote for 3, but the first relationship it only lasted an article because I'd heard really bad things about this paper, which is no longer in existence in Buffalo. And I heard that they don't pay their writers, and then I had to like write emails and follow up and be like, where's that check? You know, even though it was like for $30, it was like I needed it at the time. So that relationship didn't last long. And then like the second paper, which is still up and running, but having difficulties, the public, it's like the now only like weekly alternative paper in Buffalo that's free. And I would write about art events. And because it was too difficult to write articles for them, news features, like it was interesting, like the editing process and the way that they changed the writing so it didn't read like me, it read like someone else, like it read like their paper. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. I'm gonna just stick writing events, which was cool because then I'm like curating their events section and letting people know about events that I want to go to, which are more of like the grassroots, like small, like there used to be this great place called Dreamland, which promoted like queer artists and all facets of art, like including music, which was cool, and performance and visual art, and so I like that was my contribution, and then I worked for them for like a year, and then they're like, we can't pay you anymore, and I was like, well, I can't write for you anymore. I'm sorry, like I just, my time is valuable, and so then I got asked to be like the first like paid arts writer for Buffalo Rising, which is a daily like online publication, and they have snippets from everything in Buffalo, from like development to theater to sports to new businesses and stuff, and I wrote for them, but there was like this tone. It was like I couldn't be critical about Buffalo at all. Like I had to always be positive, which I'm like, what does that mean? And then I just felt like what I was doing before. Like I felt like I was a glorified like marketing person, and I'm like, I don't like this. Like, and it's like, so after a year, I just got too busy, and then I like handed the reins off to a younger, like upcoming like artist curator kid, and I think he's like still doing it and he loves it, and he gets a little artsy with his wording, which I'm like, oh, you go there. Good. Yeah. So, but that was like an interesting, difficult way of like navigating. And then like the one guy who was the arts writer for, because he just did it because he loved it, like for the weekly paper. Every visiting artist from somewhere else that I had in that he wrote about, like they would be like, well, that is the most, like they didn't know what like descriptor to use. They'd be like, well, that is the most interesting review I've ever received, because he kind of like approached it just kind of describing things, so it wasn't, and which from like an outsider, someone who maybe not know art speak, like it's comfortable and a way to come in, but but also the Buffalo News, they cut their arts writer this past year. Yeah. So they have these glorified marketing people now who just write about stuff like, hey, come to this. And you're like, that's from the paper that gets like the most viewership in the region. So it's like really like alarming when you're like, we don't even have that much. And then they're like taking that away. Like, what's going to happen now? And it's like, people are now like finally talking about like foundation money, like helping maybe this like local paper, the Public that I used to write for. And I'm like, why? But they've always been struggling since they started. And I'm like, why is it taking you like 4, almost 5 years to have those conversations? Like, like we knew what kind of like atmosphere was there already, like with funding. And so I don't know. So people are cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's been a couple art magazines here that did really cool stuff, and they just don't survive over time. So I've definitely seen a few emerge and come back out. But another sort of dovetail into why we made this program is the Bunker team. We just got a grant to do work with our web magazine. So to evolve our blog into more of a platform where we were making digital content, and Reese did a lot of good work on pitching that project. So in 2019, we're going to be doing an open call for contributors to do writing. Also, we're open to other kinds of media, whether that's video or podcasting. So this is kind of a nice way to get some momentum, and Tina is writing a piece for that. So we're going to be publishing that later in the winter.
Quick tack onto that, there's don't quite fill it out yet, but there's a page on the website where the open call is up. You'll hear announcements this week, and I think this is the perfect sort of an audience to sort of pre-announce that publication too. So we are very interested in having writers, photographers, creatives, however you want to react and respond to the works that are happening in Pittsburgh. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's really awesome here. I mean, oftentimes I find the way that we communicate is through Facebook. Like I wasn't on Facebook, and then I was on Facebook, and then I was off for like 4 years, and then coming back to Pittsburgh, it's like how I find out what's going on, or what people think about the art, or this or that, and it's still not critical. There's still not that added element of, maybe questioning things a little bit more. That's great that you guys are doing that. I'm excited.
Yeah. I think we want to really kind of be surprised by what people want to say about the work we do, and sort of be open to people who may not have specifically wrote about art before, but to sort of imbue their knowledge into it and embrace different mediums in the process. So, yeah.
I have a question that's sort of different.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, what you think about risk and the risk that you take as an arts writer. You were talking earlier about reviews not being critical and how you had to be super positive, or then it turns into a marketing campaign. And I'm curious your thoughts about any cyclical nature of like bad work being proliferated because there's no critique, and then people not thinking that work is mature enough to critique, and then it's still naive, and sort of that cycle, and the risk that arts writers take sometimes when they do say something critical.
Yeah. Well, what I have learned, I'm almost 40, which I'm becoming really excited about. I'm like, life experience. I have that underneath my belt now. I feel like finally I can, be like, oh, I have a little wisdom now to share. And it's like, I think it's really important to look at things through different lens, right? There is not one lens for everything, and for everyone. And there's a role that I think we all have with our voices, and it's like, honesty is always the best policy, but how are you conveying that message, right? Like, I remember as an undergrad painter, I was in graduate classes and I was making abstract paintings and very kind of geometric, organic, if you can imagine, like big colors and whatever. And I remember there was these 2 girls that were in my class who were also making kind of similar work. And when it got to like my time, because in the class to like show my work, like they were catty bitches. And like, what did that teach me? Like the only thing that taught me was actually a good lesson, which was not to take things personal, right? Like you have to separate yourself, right? And so I learned young, and that put me in a good place where I was like, okay, well, you have to like separate yourself, right? But I've also now with time have learned that like you can't have the same critical lens for everybody, and that there is a diversity of work, there's a diversity of people, and what is it critical that you're trying to say? I think that is like just something to sort of keep in check, that it's not your ego, right? And because like, I'm sorry, but we have enough of it right now, especially in politics, like getting in the way of like good things, and so I just think people can be really careful with their words and say something that's really kind of beneficial to the greater community, not just their like own like personal CV or whatever, and so
Sure.
Yeah, so does that answer your...
Yeah, I also want to know what you think of the Carnegie International.
Oh, you want to know what? I can't answer that because I haven't been there. I'm going there on Monday. Yeah. Please come to my office hours, so we can chat. So yeah, I'll see you maybe Tuesday. Yeah.
I think it's also really important to take the time to ask yourself why you like something, or why you don't like something, or why you feel this way about something. Because like I was just discussing, like oftentimes I'll see on Facebook, like I'll just say AAP has a show and someone's like, oh, it's AAP, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, if you're going to say it's bad, tell me why it's bad. Or if you're going to say it's good, say why it's good. Because then it starts a conversation, and I often feel like that is what's lacking. Like people don't realize the benefit of the risk, that either it's good or bad, that there can be a conversation that happens after it.
And I learned that in grad school. Like that's where those conversations were really kind of
Yeah.
ingrained. And it's like, again, like what I was saying about lenses, it's like,
Yeah.
it's the way that you're looking at things. Like they're putting your, the separation of like the personal and such. Like there's a way of like being able to talk about something without like, being a dick,
Yeah.
Like,
Being a catty bitch.
yeah, stop being catty bitch.
Do you think that part of the lack of criticism is that we're at a point where people don't quite understand the role of artists in communities? The arts have been watered down severely and been used to like not criticize society, not question society. So at least I feel like when you're saying different lenses, it's also like some people don't even know where to come at it from. I mean, all we're at right now is personal like or dislike, but shouldn't it be something bigger than that? Like we have a general expectation or understanding about the role of artists in our world today. There's a lot of stuff happening, and the arts are always under attack, which often leads to a softer artist. You know what I mean? Like a less controversial artist. So I don't know if you get that question.
Yeah, well, I it's actually like it's hitting sort of like a spot with me because it's like it's because like what I'm hearing is about voice, right? And like being confident about having a voice, but also having a safe place to have that voice, right? And I think that that's something that I feel that it's being under attack right now. Like I'll just say it. The night that he was elected, I was at a bar in Buffalo and I was standing there just like in awe, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is our reality now. And there was a lesbian on my left and like another person on my right. And strangers, just people I didn't know. And for about like a week or two before then, I had just been carrying around a flag in my bag that I had bought at a thrift store that was like one of those like polyester things that was already in a plastic bag. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And I looked to the woman on my left and I was like, and I opened up my bag and it was almost like, hey, do you want? And I was like, I have a flag in my bag. I was like, and I wasn't drunk or anything. Like this was just like an emotional time. And I was like, would you like to go outside and burn this with me right now? And she was like, I would. And then all of a sudden, like everyone that was at the bar, just like that was standing there, we like shuffled out like we were like a part of this ceremony. And it turned into something so beautiful. And it was sort of like really kind of funny because like we're like trying to light it with our lighters and it's not taking. And we're like, God, and everyone's like watching us like on the sidewalk. And I'm like, God, this is such a fail, And so then there's a car coming towards us because it was a one-way street. And I'm like, stop, like flagging him down. And I was like, he rolls down his window and is like, do you happen to have anything flammable in your car? And he's like, actually, he's like, I have aftershave. And I was like, that'll work. I was like, can I use it? And he's like, yeah, sure. So he actually pulls his car over, gets the aftershave out, and we're dousing the flag. And then all of a sudden it lights. And we just sort of drop it. And that guy, because it was being videotaped, like actually ended up jumping on it, which caused some controversy. And I walked up to the camera and just, told Trump that he would never have our country, and like very passionate and just very real. And that video then was shared with the person, me and the other woman. And I decided to share it because I felt proud, because I was like, I'm standing up, like I needed to do this, and I need to let people to know that it's okay. Nobody was harmed. There were no accidents. Like the guy who owns the bar came out with like a thing of ice and water and like doused the flag. I ended up keeping like the remnants of it because I'm like, these are really beautiful sculptures now. But it was like, ever since then, I felt like I haven't had a voice, which really sucks. So I shared that, and my profiles were all public at the time, and I got death threats and I lost family members, like my sister, and it was a real serious thing. And you know, everyone's talking about how that election like really divided families and stuff, and like I felt it on the front line. But I think what was scary was just how it made me feel as an artist, because I've always been about taking risks. Like that's the only way that change can happen. And just to feel like I didn't have like it was like I was just like repeatedly like being struck with a knife, you know, like while still being alive, you know what I mean? Like that's what it made me feel like. And it was awful, you know, and it really changed a lot of people's perspectives of me in Buffalo, actually, to a negative, you know. It was like I had like my benefactor, you know, he you know, it was like, he's like, you should make your profile private now. And I was like, okay, right, like I'm gonna do that. Like and I did that with all of them, because I was like, I can't, I want to expose myself when I want to expose myself, but it was like, oh man, that was really hard, you know? And so I'm feeling like now, like, I don't know, like I'm wanting to encourage people to have their voices and their safe spaces, and to use time efficiently and happily. Like everyone just needs to be happy, you know, like whatever that looks like. I think that's like the biggest message that I'm like wanting to share right now, because like that moment just really kind of changed everything. And I feel like a part of me was taken away that'll never be returned, you know, but at the same time, like I'm back and I'm better than ever, and I'm like ready, you know. So and I moved down to Buffalo, yay. I'm free. So I don't know if that answered your question.
See another hand.
Just in response to that, it sounds like a really strong case for art writing. Really, the way you describe the sort of procession and the ritual of that event, and then the creation of these sculptures. That's great contextualization. And the Facebook and social media has been discussed. It's the like button,
Yeah.
and you now have a couple more options, and that's the extent of the response you're may be able to have. But
Totally, and it's like
I did have a question.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like protecting yourself and that decision to go private and with your accounts, but then also like protecting your First Amendment right and protecting your right to free speech, and that balance between the two. And right now, with just your point of like, you can either like, dislike, happy face, heart it, whatever the emoji response is, thumbs up, thumbs down, there's no further to it.
I remembered it.
Okay, good.
I wonder your thoughts and your practice and how you've done it in the past, how you're going about it with the writings you're preparing here, and the contextualization of art. So what in contemporary art, it needs writing, it needs contextualization, and I wonder what your thought of the importance or your strategies of contextualizing maybe a single piece of work or a city's sort of school or whatever it might be in the larger context and conversation of contemporary art.
Yeah, you know, I always think about audience when I'm writing, so I really like everybody, right? So I personally write with language that appeals to everybody, you know, that doesn't necessarily like dumb down anything, you know, but there's words that you can like, I don't know, like I don't want anyone to have to fucking grab a dictionary to like with my writing and be like, what does that mean? Like, you know.
But how are you supposed to liminally subvert the paradigm?
Too bad.
Yeah, there's ways. Language is really complicated. You know, you can use, you know, and get your message across, and or you know, subliminal. Yeah. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about your thoughts, and this is really just following along with the train of thought so far. about navigating getting funding, and also Jesse, for you too, of projects that do push boundaries and that do that have an edge to them, and that maybe do speak truths that maybe are harder for people, not even truths, but raise a dialogue around issues that are tough. Those funders sort of relying on to there's that fine line of pleasing them and for future funding. It seems to be really hard to navigate, but boy, do we really need to. I applaud you for taking those steps.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah, I mean, we're very much like kind of learning how we might do that, and have had small successes. But it's kind of wild. It all just takes more time than I thought it would.
You gotta find the right.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I'm telling myself. But yeah, but I guess it's nice for Bunker. We've been in operation for 6 years now, so like it's really comforting being able to sort of look back. Like imagine every year is kind of like a slide, and it all kind of like to see through all of them is really kind of comforting, and it's starting to really speak for itself. So I'm hoping that we can kind of just find our ways of like pointing to moments and finding a language around what we have been able to do, and just sort of forge a way that makes sense for us and our values.
And even finding private individuals who build
Yeah.
that, because that's probably it's a little easier to navigate without board of directors and all those people.
Yeah.
Have to all be pleased.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have a board of directors that is essentially like a working board. It's our team. We're 95% volunteer run. So
What I meant was that
Oh,
foundation
sure.
has the board of directors, and that's where you run. If you're getting a grant from something.
yeah, right. Yeah.
What I'm about to ask is kind of touched upon in previous conversations, but I was wondering a little more on it. I was wondering what you think needs to be set up for a critical dialogue around art to occur, because we all want that, but we're not going to go on Facebook and just critique art out of nowhere. In magazines, I don't really feel like we have any publications that are really set up to be like focused on critiquing art. Again, it's more of like an advertisement or sort of like a self-congratulatory view. My own personal process is because like we view our art scene as too fragile to really be critical about it. And like with the stuff like that in mind, sort of like we can't be critical because we need to protect something, or we need to some other reason why we can't be critical. What do you think needs to be set in place for us to overcome those hypothetical barriers and create a space where we can actually be critical? Because it's one thing to say, hey, we need to talk about art critically. It's another thing to actually be comfortable and moral in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, like my first suggestion, it's nice when Pittsburgh's talked about like on the national or international level, and I know that there was an article that recently came out in like the New York Times. Like, I think the title was really misleading. Like, I was like, oh my God, did they go to a place like Bunker? Because it was like Artist Run Spaces was in the title. And I was like, oh, Mattress Factory, right. Okay. Totally, spaced that place. So I guess like, one thing that so it was lacking in Buffalo, but what I was seeing was starting to happen was there were writers, like freelance writers that would write about something in Buffalo, like at one of the museums or something, and then pitch it for another publication. I think that's really helpful. And so if I'm sure, I mean, it's part of the marketing. Like I know, like, the large museums, like they pitch those already out there, but like trying to do it on like the sort of other level of things, and so I would do that because everyone knows people, and so just to start getting the criticality and just, having the name like in the press, I think is a good thing. But, locally, because that's something that we've been kind of talking about is, I guess just like a couple things. Like one, I think everyone has a voice and can write, you know, and I think believing in themselves and doing it and practice, like just with anything, like you get more comfortable with it. But then it's like, okay, so you guys already have people that are great writers, and so it's like, where do they publicize their words, right? And so I don't know, like just there might be ways like that Bunker's doing it as well, like with the online publications, like, you know, because anyone can have a website, you know, and so overhead's a lot cheaper than doing print, you know, so that might be an avenue in which to, you know, further investigate and sort of cultivate. But, you know, it starts kind of with education too. So, you know, at schools and stuff, or like getting interns or something to kind of just try to promote it, and you know, I think would be helpful. But in terms of the criticality, I just, you know, I still feel like, you know, people can be critical about things without having to push buttons, you know, like it's totally doable. So
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's in competition with each other. Like, I think there can be criticality and there can be sort of like somewhat of an uplifting spirit to making writings or content about art. And that might be easier said than done, but I think it's possible.
I think in a lot of ways, like a lot of people are waiting for permission to do something.
you
Like-
have my permission, just do it.
Oh, Tina, thank you.
God. Stop wasting time, okay? Like, let's stop talking and start acting.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like,
Hey, I just moved here about 6 months ago. I lived in New York for 2 years.
Woo, welcome.
Pittsburgh's an amazing town. I'm shocked that there's like a street rag, kind of like, you know, like zine style arts writing. It's like such a blank slate, and there's so many amazing people here and creative force here. Like, just foolproof itself. Like, it's collective. A lot of that collective co-op sort of force that people are doing grassroots kind of. The permission's here, and I'm just like, I'm so inspired to be here and away from the big dirty city where there's no access to any. There's access all the time, but there's zero time. Here you have time and access. You just want to make it. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just kind of reinforcing what Tina's saying. It's like there's so much permission here, and it's great to hear that Bunker is doing like you're starting this new online thing. But I think there's like a lot of room for this like casual, not even casual is not the word, but more like on the street level criticality, because a hunger for it and a need, and it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be like the smartest. You don't have to be like, you know, Reverse Smith.
yeah.
You know,
Be great to have.
yeah, get her here for sure. But well, David Carey just reviewed the show at
Yeah.
you know, I mean, there are people here.
Yeah,
Like poking
definitely.
in, poking out, you know, but I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just like,
Yeah,
I
I
just
guess
feel like
it's,
there's such an open, it's just like such an open forum here.
yeah, and
Like
I mean,
the people who are doing the Roadkill gallery, the guys from Point 5 Gallery are starting like a mobile U-Haul truck gallery. That's, I don't know what they're gonna do, but that's cool.
yeah,
That's
that is
super
cool. Yeah.
Like this is a cool time to do stuff like that, and it's just like, go for it.
Well, yeah, going back to like,
I don't know what it's like with the money part.
yeah,
Like, I don't know what it's like, you know, finding the money to do it, but like just the awesome Pittsburgh thing, those guys giving $1,000 out. That
Word.
seems like
That goes real
I put an application into Austin Pittsburgh
Yeah.
for the publication,
Yeah.
and I think they will be judging on it like maybe right now.
Yeah.
And it was to buy, hopefully they fund it, bus ads.
Oh, sweet.
Like the interior bus ads to print long form art journalism, art writing from the publication.
That's
You get that.
amazing.
I would just-
So,
So it's
knock on wood that
It's
happens.
similar to the bus Maggie idea.
It's
you
real.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping that
And
this will be
that
an
was, like,
interesting
that was
little
an
dimension too.
incredible
Cool.
The
Like
bus
the
thing
bus,
was an
like the
incredible
shadow space.
idea
Yeah.
that had access
Just
to
take it
everything, you know,
everywhere.
just passersby. Yeah. So cool.
And if you wanna put stuff up at this meeting.
You want
Yeah,
long form?
yeah.
Sure, great.
Bring it all together.
yeah, Yeah.
Does anybody else have any topics
Questions,
to throw out?
comments? Yeah.
Maybe one more lane.
Can I just ask you what you're working on now here at Bunker? What do you think you'll be ready for the Bunker website?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been really busy here, visiting a lot of people and places, and which I'm really excited about. And thanks again for helping to make that happen. And so there's a few different avenues, but because I'm really interested. So I grew up like in central New York. If anyone knows New York State, between Syracuse and Utica, and like technically the smallest city in that of New York State. So I kind of grew up along the Erie Canal and sort of the Rust Belt area, and like my parents worked at factories, and so when I came back to Buffalo or New York State, like it was a familiar place, and so just seeing sort of the progression of these areas and always being an artist, and how that's kind of how those places have influenced the arts and so forth, is a topic that I'm really interested in. And so being here, it's kind of like comparing and contrasting. And so, so thinking about specifically like Bunker 2 in terms of the city and the arts community, and it being a Rust Belt city, and how it kind of plays into the whole ecosystem and so forth. So I don't have like a tagline yet, but those are the things that I'm interested in. And so been trying to kind of experience like a slice of Pittsburgh, a little bit of everything. So to kind of get a sense of like what's going on here and what's happening and such. So
Yeah, and for AAP, you went into artists. We had our members apply, and we've gone to 4 artist studios. I think there's one more, or you did that.
I still have more. Like I'm still doing. Yeah.
Yeah, because part of a really critical part of writing is talking, like getting that conversation started, so then you have something to put on paper. And so like we had our artist members submit their statements and their current work. So Tina's been out and about in Pittsburgh, which has been really awesome for us.
Yeah, so artists through AAP, and then just other artists whose work I was really interested in, or that are kind of working along like the social practice engagement areas, is one of my personal interests because of my work. So
yeah, the way that we kind of set this up was so that she could do research through like engagement and one-on-one studio visits, and just like really getting out and experiencing things. So I think we were able to kind of accelerate what like normally if someone's just here for a few days, like you kind of got the fast forward of everything. But yeah, it's really great for us to have someone, like I feel like she is so qualified to write about Bunker and to help contextualize that a little bit. Even if that's just one component of the piece, it's good to know that someone who's run spaces and who is an artist and has been in cities, various ones, to make that writing. So
well, guys, we have a ton of coffee and some cupcakes left. Let's continue these conversations, but one-on-one and or during studio hours. Again, Tuesday 2 to 4 Artisan, and Thursday 5 to 7 at Ace. So, and also screen printing now.
Oh yeah, if anyone wants to make a print, Matt and I are here. We have a screen and we have bags that were donated. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.